Okay, can you guys hear me? You're still with us? You guys look great out there. Thank you so much. And as we wind down for today, oh, I just mentioned wine. You guys know what we're doing next, right? So as we wind down for today and as we have the furniture picked up here, I just want to thank you all for just being such great sports. I love the amount of interaction, collaboration, all the things that's been happening at the conference. So thank you so much for that. And I'm one for celebration, so definitely give yourselves a round of applause for everything that you've done. Yes. Okay, so again, my name is Dr. Marline C. Duroseau. I go by Dr. Mar. I am the Managing Director of HR and Leadership Development here at Brandon Hall, and I have the pleasure of calling up my two panelists, the fabulous Miss Selena and Miss Taylor. Join me on stage, please.
Hello.
Yes, because you're sitting right next to me, you have the pleasure of going first. Introduce yourselves to our lovely audience.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here with you. This has been great, such a treat so far. My name is Taylor Williams. I'm the manager of corporate training at Haskell, and we are a design build firm based in Jacksonville, Florida, with a lot of regional offices and offices in Latin America and Asia. That's helpful for what Haskell is. So I work for learning and development, and you know a lot about that if you're in this room.
And hello, everyone. I'm Selena McLaughlin. I work for Bank of America. I've been there for 27 years. In my day job, I do executive development for our level down from the C-suite who are successors of critical roles, and I develop them with key learning experiences to make sure they're prepared for the next role. So I'm excited to be here. It's so good to see such a good crowd still hanging with us. We promise not to take too long, like Dr. Mar said, between the wine. But I want you all to definitely be participating with us. So we look forward to talking with you today.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies, for your introduction. One of the things that has been repeated throughout our 2 days together so far as it relates to leadership development focuses on how do we develop our leaders. And with the presentation that we just had from UMG here, you see how we have to go from the beginning, you have to prep, get everything going, and then how do you keep it forward? How do you show up and how do you make it work by the time it happens? So that's what we're gonna talk a little bit about here because we do have these two ladies who are seasoned leadership executives, right, with us. So we're gonna talk a little bit about, early leadership, what leadership looks like now for you, and what advice we have as leadership continues to evolve for the future. Okay?
Great.
All right. So I like to have my stats. It's very important that we get our numbers. So Brandon Hall Group Research, which is our research, shows that 80% of organizations recognize the need for major changes in how they develop leaders. And I think all of us can agree that that is one of the major things that we've been focusing on as the conference continues, okay? So the main reason why they want to focus on that is because the capabilities that defined leadership even 5 years ago, they're no longer enough. They're no longer the same, okay? So I want to talk a little bit about early leadership from you two ladies and get your insight, okay? So when you think back to the very beginning of your leadership journey, what did you believe leadership was, and how has that belief changed? And I want you guys to do the same thing. Think back to your early leadership journey. What did you think it was, and how has it changed? And we'll hear from Taylor first.
Okay. It makes me laugh a little bit because I immediately remember that I have to have grace for myself when I look back on early days of leadership, right? Maybe we all feel that a little bit. But I know that I was overly focused on knowing my stuff or proving that I did.
Okay.
And before I worked at Haskell, I was more of a consultant and a professor. And if I went to go, sell my work or try to get a gig, it was like I was reading off of my resume or something. I think I was overly trying to prove I have the chops, I've done the things, And so I have to have grace for that because that makes me feel a little cringy now thinking about that old self, you know? But I think now I believe leadership is a lot more other-oriented, right? It is about not showing up as like my most powerful or adept self necessarily, although those things are also important, but it's how can I show up as a real, whole human being, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but also how can I show up and add value to the people who I'm meant to be working for. And I think leadership really needs a lot of that right now. Certainly we need technical skills. The landscape is changing drastically all the time. The world and leadership and the scope of business is, you know, diversifying all the time, and those are good things. And so I think leaders have to keep up with the other orientation of the work that we do, and not be as focused on the self. And so a lot of that has to do with being authentic, but also in being empathic, in listening and being clued in to what other people need and what they value, and trying to meet them where they are.
Thank you for that. So instead of kind of going into it being hard on yourself, expecting yourself to have all the answers, it's like, okay,
And to prove it.
And to prove it,
Yes.
let me take a step back and kind of, it's okay to learn some of this stuff as I go.
Yes, and to admit I don't know everything. And actually that's really nice to not have to know everything, and trust the people that I work with and that I'm learning from, and folks I might even, you know, manage on my team have infinite amounts to teach me.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with me holding my own and proving that I know my stuff.
Okay, thank you for
I
that.
gotta have grace for that. Okay, I
Yes,
just want to be
thank
real
you.
clear about that.
Thank you for that. Selena, when you think back to the beginning of your leadership journey, what did you believe it was, and how has that belief changed for you?
Well, I can tell you, I was an executionist, right? So I can get things done. And I took pride in that, right? So who doesn't, right? And early in your career, you're like, I'm getting it done well, good job, right? But then I started getting labeled as you're not strategic, right? So what does that really mean? If I can take your visionary goals and I can turn them into tactics, then why am I not strategic? I was able to understand and turn it into it and get it done. Someone has to be the doer, right? So I think that was where I stood in the beginning of my leadership career. Much more now, I'm all about what's the architect. We've heard, like, probably in every breakout session, what's the framework, what's the architecture of what you're doing. Don't always have to have the answers, just like Taylor said, but you do have to be able to create the framework, create the culture, manage the energy of your team that you have, the actual, you know, project that you're leading, whatever the case may be. I think that's where my head is today. Is leadership is not just about getting it done, although performance is key. It's really 10% of what you do. The other part of it is, how do you lead your teams? How do you create that right energy? How do you make sure that they're feeling fulfilled and have the capability and the clarity to actually execute on what they do? And so that's where I feel like I am now. How do I give that clarity? How do I make sure that they feel like they can do what I need them to do without me being in the way, right? And so I think that's how it's kind of changed for me. I still can get it done like no other, but I try to step back and let others step up, and I think that's what leadership is.
Yeah, Dr. Marsh, I love what Selena was saying about managing energy. My favorite yoga teacher recently said that she thinks of herself as an orchestrator of energy. And that's such a beautiful phrase, but I think there is something to being a leader in any space where you are holding the space for people to learn and to grow. We can be the orchestrator of that, and we bring so much of that energy with us too into spaces that we go, right? So we can help other leaders learn that. And in our leadership development, we also say that leadership journeys are really about becoming, you know, going from doing to being. And I think you're describing that so beautifully, Selena, too, is that we're taught to be doers and to produce and execute, and a lot of it becomes a way of being. It's different.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you know, it's funny because when you do look back, the beauty of reflection is that we can use those lived experiences to figure out a way forward, right? And say, okay, well, I did that before, maybe it was successful, maybe it wasn't, how do I pivot, how do I move forward? But also the beauty of reflection is thinking back to when was that time? So those beliefs that no longer work for you, right? Those assumptions you had about leadership. Can you think back to a time where it actually limited you as a leader? Meaning doing it all yourself. When did that show up as a limitation, or forcing yourself to execute? So now that you know better, looking back, was there ever an experience you remember where you were limited in your leadership because of that assumption?
It's hard for me to choose one. Would you like to go first?
Yes, I mean,
Too many.
here's a couple, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, I would tell you that there's a couple different things that come to my mind. One is early in my leadership, I wanted to be in the rooms, right, at the tables that I saw that I wasn't invited to. And so I said to myself, when I get at that table in that room, I'm gonna, show them what I have, right? I'm gonna tell them everything that I know, and I'm gonna prove that I know my stuff. And so you get in this big meeting with the big voices, with all the big opinions, with no pauses, you can't get a word in, right? And then you try to match that energy. You try to be and emulate them. And so I started to think about it, and I was like, you know what? This is not my game. Like, this is not necessarily how I need to play the game. What helped me is I had a turning point. And that turning point was really when I said, like, let me just quiet my voice. Let me just let them lean into me. Pay attention to what I'm saying, because what I'm saying is with intention. I don't have to be the loudest voice in the room anymore. I don't have to say something every time it's a point to say something. I think it's that quiet confidence that you can have, and it goes farther than anything that you can really say. Don't you know, probably every one of you have someone at your job or your company that has to say something about every single thing, right? And sometimes it's just reinforcement of something someone said previously. It's not even impactful. And so, to me, I pride myself on only saying things when it's something I feel is going to make a difference. I don't have to answer every call.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking of not a specific moment necessarily, but kind of a mindset I've had to shift. And Selena made me think of it earlier too, of like, anybody familiar with Clifton Strengths?
Yes.
Anybody into it? Okay, I love it. And so my leading strength is I'm an activator. And so that's, I like to execute and get things done and produce and whatever, but all my other strengths lie in people. And so I've really had to, even though I lead with activation, I've really had to call on these other strengths of being invested in people, because as someone who is activating and also has a very high value of autonomy, I can take the ball and run with it, right? And as a background in athletics and all these kind of mindsets I grew up with, it was like leading came naturally and I could just go and do. When I was an individual contributor, that was fine. I was asked to do those things. I could dole them out and asked to do more. But now that I manage a team who has very different strengths, very different disc profiles, right? Whatever you're into, MBTI, any of those things, but different personalities, different communication styles, it can be helpful that I'm an activator with high levels of autonomy, but guess what? That's not always great for my team. So for me, some of it has been a shift in mindset to how do I use those strengths, not get rid of them, not hide them, but just how do I channel those in a way that actually works with other people's strengths and values where they're coming from.
Absolutely. That was beautiful. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And again, I love to look back and reflect, because as we continue to exist in this world of leadership that's constantly evolving, you can think back to those times where you assumed one thing, learned that you need to pivot and do something else, and that'll help you keep going as well. Okay? Thank you, ladies, for that. So now we're going to move on to our next theme here, decision-making and confidence. Today's leaders are expected to make decisions in environments where strategic planning cycles can't keep pace with what? Change. And where AI is increasingly influencing decisions, okay? So, a lot of the times today, leaders are making decisions that are just more ambiguous, right, and accelerated than in the past, because everything needs to happen now. Everything is happening at a greater scale. Everything needs to be done as of yesterday. So let's talk a little bit about how your decision-making and confidence has evolved, right, as the different pressures increased in your leadership journey. So how has your relationship with confidence evolved from proving yourself to trusting yourself?
Yeah, that's a big difference. You
Yeah.
want to go for it?
I'll go first, and it's kind of what I spoke about earlier. Like, I went from being the loudest one to being very selective, and I do that on purpose. And I just feel like, I don't have to prove, I don't have to, get permission. I don't feel that way anymore. And so I think that just comes with experience and having success over time, and people knowing what they should expect and predict ability from you. But I think for me, confidence had to grow. Like, it took a while, right? And I think that sometimes when I go back and I look at executives that I used to report to or support when I was early in my career, and they still see me as that 20-year-old person coming straight out of college, sometimes you have to correct that. And you have to show them, like, hey, I'm not that 20-year-old anymore. And so I do think that confidence comes within time as far as just being success and having repeated behaviors of that. And then a little bit of the mindset, like you said, like knowing who you are, what you bring to the table, and really, I don't know about you all, but people treat you the way you allow them to treat you. And so I do think that it's a lot of that too, kind of pulling all those things together to make sure that, you come across in the way that you expect to.
That's great. I love that last point too. Yeah, I would say two different things. Like, confidence grew in knowing that not all conflict is bad. Conflict doesn't have to mean that people are fighting. Conflict doesn't have to mean that anybody is upset with each other. So understanding that when there's disagreement or pushback or something, then a lot of that is very productive, right? And we kind of know that in theory, but feeling that out as a leader and becoming more confident with pushing back or being pushed back was really helpful, and learning how to work with different personalities and how they approach conflict. I think that it was not to say that that was easy, but I think that helped with confidence over time in terms of making decisions, being able to make decisions when it's not a popular one. And that can go with strategic alignment decisions or tough decisions that have to be made about team members, or how we even give feedback, or things like that. And the other thing that comes to mind is being rooted in ourselves, like Selena said, with an awareness of our values. I think whether it's coming back to your company values or your personal values, I think maybe that even sounds a little bit trite, but I think if we stay rooted in those things as kind of a navigation system, at the very least, we will stay in integrity with ourselves.
That's right.
And if we know we can come back to that, and it's kind of a grounding force, I think that can be really helpful and give us some confidence that I always know what I'm coming back to. Yeah.
And I love how you both mentioned, which is true, as your confidence grows, your ability to make decisions and your ability to assess situations, which will drive how you make a decision, that evolves as well, right? And then you become maybe the known go-to person when there is a conflict or there is a problem. We know that we can rely on you to make the right decision, right? So keeping in line with the decision making, what's an example of a decision early on in your career that felt risky at the time, but ultimately has shaped your leadership style?
I actually have an example that happened outside of my work at Haskell when I was doing more consulting. Another side gig that I have is I run a live storytelling organization where we put folks on stage in front of like a live ticketed audience, and they're telling their true comedic stories. It's very fun. I'm biased, but I think it's fun.
Multifaceted.
Well, yes, hopefully so. So early on in that organization, we were selling out the venue we were in. People were loving it. It was going great. Keep in mind, it was comedic. About a year into it, folks from the community started asking me if I would do more socially conscious storytelling shows to really get down to some of the things that, more serious issues that people were feeling in the community. Obviously, I felt like this was of great value. I have a background in mental health and was able to kind of field these sort of storytelling shows and help people and coach those stories. But we went from having consistent crowds at our comedic shows of about 200 people to 50 to 60 people at socially conscious shows. So I had to decide, does that matter? Are these smaller crowds okay because they're the ones who want to be there? Or do I have to stop and slow down enough to say, I don't have to do it all. I don't have to make everyone happy. I don't have to meet the needs of everything and everyone. And so that was, I don't know if that sounds silly now, but that was a really hard decision for me, where I felt like I was making people laugh and then serving the needs of the community in this deeper way that actually wasn't really working. And I had to decide it's okay to let something go and trust myself enough to go with what our bread and butter was, and that serving the community with laughter was enough. You know, like that was okay, and it was our initial intention. And it's continued to work, so that's good.
And that's a great example, because a lot of the times we always hear about how numbers matter. So imagine you have to make this decision where your number is going from 200 or so people only to 50. So I can definitely understand that.
Yeah.
Selena?
So mine is a little bit different. I mean, how many of you have been tapped on the shoulder for a stretch opportunity? You better be raising your hand. Nobody? Okay, I was getting ready to say, wait a minute. But I mean, so like I had gotten to this pattern of where I was being tapped on the shoulder year over year for a new opportunity, stretch opportunity, right? And to the point where it was a frustration of mine, like, why am I getting tapped and why do I keep saying yes? I need to learn to not say yes to everything without the promotion, the title, the money, whatever the case may be. But I took on this last stretch assignment, and it was a cross-functional project where it was bringing two learning organizations together. If you were here this morning, you saw Bernard Hampton, who is at Bank of America. He's the Academy executive. So he wasn't that executive at that time. It was before he came, but it was his organization where we were bringing the Academy and learning together. And it was a daunting task. I mean, it was so many people that we had, and we were trying to figure out, you know, process, people, technology, all the things that we needed to do to bring these two organizations together. So to say the least, I didn't have all the answers, nor should I be expected to have the answers. But what I did have was the way to get the framework together, the architecture together, to understand who the people were, how do we need to make sure that we kind of put together work streams and projects so that we can kind of coordinate the efforts. And so we had 25 work streams, 221 people, I don't know where the one came from, but 221 people working on bringing organizations together. And I think that for me, that was a stretch assignment that was, you know, a real pivotal moment in my career, right? Because it was large, it was high visibility, but it taught me a lot of great things that I still carry with me as transformative skills that are transferable in whatever I do today. And so even though I'm a program manager for executive development today, I still go back to the basics of, okay, if I don't know the answers, what do I need to do to get the people in place? How do I need to set this up? It's almost like what they were saying before about, you know, how to do the sound check, how to set the stage, how to actually have the show, right? So it was all of those elements, but you can apply that to anything you do. And it's right, it's the easiest way if you're lost in how to get something done. Think about those stages and implement that in whatever problem you have. I assure you it will get you started on the right path and be a success.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And it's so funny because to me, that just illustrated both of you ladies' example of your soloist to orchestra.
Yeah,
right?
I've seen that too. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. All righty, so we're gonna go ahead. Our next one here is people influence and leadership maturity. 71% of organizations are increasing their focus on developing leaders at all levels, especially frontline and mid-level leaders, because leadership impact is now distributed across the organization, right? It's not just a top level situation when it comes to leadership. So it's not just senior level, and more organizations are heavily investing in leadership at every level. So I'd love to explore how your approach to leading people and influencing outcomes has evolved. So my question around that one is, how has your approach to leading people changed as your responsibilities grew?
I really think a lot of this for me has to do with that mix of activator plus people skills that I was talking about, because the other part of my leadership journey that I've needed to adjust, I guess, is that I typically approach people with a lot of warmth, friendliness, openness, empathy, things like that. I think I've had to learn along the way, and this has been helpful in developing other leaders as well, that if there is conflict, if there is difficult feedback, like I've said, I had to like disassociate that with something is wrong here. And so that I can use that warmth and that openness and still be a strong and assertive leader. Okay. I also think another thing that's occurred to me is that not everything has to be urgent. There's some strange belief that for leaders to be strong or get things done, that everybody's hair needs to be on fire all the time, you know?
Yes.
Everything in learning development is somehow equal to like also being a heart surgeon or, you know, saving lives. I don't know. But really not. It's really not like that. Mm-hmm. And so being able to approach problem solving, decision making, growing other people, and, you know, becoming a great supervisor, manager at any level is also about keeping your cool and being able to replace false senses of urgency with a real approach of calm. Right. And being able to, approach things with calmness and curiosity and openness versus that urgent kind of aggression that we think maybe makes us a little bit more important or something. Right. So kind of questioning some of those things that we do just as human beings.
Yeah,
so natural to do.
Answer.
Yeah. I mean, and I agree with Taylor. I mean, I think that for me, when I think of urgency, maybe it's not about the urgency you're putting on others, but how fast you're acting. So for me, one of the things that I struggle with, and I probably still struggle with it a little bit, I'll be honest, is moving too fast. Mm-hmm. You know the answer, you think you know the answer, you want to get it done, you want to do it, oh, I've done this before 10 times, let's go. And then how many of you know that the direction changes, or it's a caveat here or there, and it causes you to do rework, and you rework, and you rework, and it's like, was that smart? Like, did I need to start right away, or should I have like asked the right questions, give it time to kind of breathe, and then go forward? And I think about urgency versus velocity, right? So moving fast. It's so funny when I was thinking of like answers to these questions. I don't know. Don't judge me. How many of you have watched The Price is Right? The Barker days of Price is Right.
Yes.
Okay, so you know how you have the chance to spin the big wheel? And how many of you seen where somebody had to fall? Okay, so the little lady fell, poor little lady, right? But she was probably a petite little lady who grabbed the wheel kind of low, and she tried to spin it, and it was just too heavy for her. And how many know what Bob says? He's like, oh, it didn't go around. The wheel didn't go all the way around. And so I think about that, because then you have a big guy coming up and he's reaching high, right? His goals are high, he's reaching high, he's pulling that wheel down, and the velocity of that wheel turning, and it keeps going, boop, 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 right? Keeps going, you're like, when is it gonna stop? So you think about that in your leadership, right? If you just kind of take a moment and not do the small wheel, moving fast, can't reach too high because you don't have all the information. But if you get all the data and you actually kind of reach high, what difference does that make in your momentum of you, of your team, of the work? That's the way I think about it. And that's what I had to tell myself just today. Like, I have to still do that. Just slow down for a second. I know you know how to do it. I know you can do it, and this is the way you used to do it. But let's challenge yourself to do it a little differently. Take a moment. Ask the right questions. Let it breathe, because you never know what happens in a day of conversations, right? And then let's move forward together. So you kind of align everybody once, and then you move together, and you can achieve so much more. So I try to tell myself that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And what I would add is that you both mentioned like that sense of urgency and how we leaders normally feel like you have to put the fires out now and all hands on deck, and you know, no framework, no plan, just let's do it. And it kind of, to the point of having influence, It then becomes, are you providing your leadership in a way where you're just exerting authority over your team and your staff? Or are you truly influencing them to jump in there with you to be able to, get the resolution to the problem that you have?
That's a great point. And also, not only authority, but anxiety. I mean, then we're leading with anxiety, which our teams feel and they react to it.
Right.
And they may not make great decisions, or they may just think like, oh gosh, every time we come up against a challenge, she's anxious, and that's not productive either.
It's not productive, and it's unsettling, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, whether or not your team, just for the sake of us talking, like you, whether they trust you, whatever it is, they're going to feed off of and respond to the way you are. So if you're just exerting authority without the calmness that you mentioned, without the level-headedness, and being able to get them to a point where, okay, we can trust Taylor and make that decision, then you can influence them versus just being authoritative, towards them.
It's a great distinction. I heard a leader say recently, when she walks in a room, she thinks, I bring the weather. I bring the weather.
Yes.
And that's
I
cool.
love that.
Isn't that great?
And one of my favorite quotes, I don't know if you have heard of it, probably by now, but Cy Wakeman, and it says like, good leaders don't manage people, they manage the energy of people.
Yes.
And I try to incorporate that in what I do, because I do think that, we talked a lot about culture, energy all day, but I think it's something to that, right? Like, I think that the way that you come and your energy, it starts there with you. What you bring in the room is what you're going to get reciprocated. So I do believe in that. And sometimes it's so funny, people say, well, I'm so glad you came. It's just a different vibe when you get here, right? I take that as, managing energy. And I think it goes for personal or workplace. But I do think, don't underestimate the power of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Great point.
All righty, so I moved on to our next theme here, growth, resilience, and perspective. Due to time, we probably won't touch on all three, but we'll start with organizations are shifting from episodic leadership training to continuous learning ecosystems, because leaders must operate in environments where change happens in weeks or days and not just years, which goes back to the sense of urgency that always exists, because the ecosystem, the climate, the economy, everything is just always changing and so fast, right? We have to be able to respond to that. So today we have to be able to adapt quickly as it relates to leadership. So it's less about mastering one role and more about growing continuously. So let's talk a little bit about resilience, growth, and what helped you stay grounded, right, on your leadership journey. And let's start with that. What helped you stay grounded when leadership felt heavy or isolating?
Well, I mean, for me, I would say, I kind of call it the 3 Ps. So 1 P is, what's your purpose? What's your intention? What grounds you from that perspective of what you're delivering on? So for me, it always starts with purpose. But also perspective, because I do think that sometimes you can kind of say, it's the worst thing in the world, but it's just one moment. And so you have to really or it's one piece of the pie, so you have to kind of really understand what is the perspective of what you're dealing with when things get heavy. And then I think the people, right? So I always have a circle of friends and trusted advisors that if I need to be told the truth about whatever's going on, I can trust that they can do that. And I do think that, when you think about purpose and perspective and people, if you always have those things in the center of your, reach of making sure that you kind of like check yourself, you'll always be successful with that. So those are my 3 Ps.
What Selena said, I'm just going to take that answer. That's what mine's going to be too. No, I do love that, and I find that when I feel mixed up in myself, that putting a focus back on my kids, my partner, like the things that are kind of going on outside of the madness, that can often be really helpful. And then for me, to be honest, I have really found a lot of centering and developing a somatic practice where I become more aware of what my body is feeling in moments of anxiety or tension or busyness or whatever, we're not necessarily raised to think about that kind of stuff growing up in our households and cultures, but to really pay attention to like what the body is telling you. And many times it's giving us signals before the mind does, but we go straight to thought. Like, how do I want to react? You know, like that limbic hijack. And so kind of grounding in somatic practices, meditation, things like that have been super helpful. And that may not be a traditional answer, but that's one thing that's really helped me a bunch along the way.
Yeah, I think that's important because in order to lead, the physical apparatus, which is you, needs to be physically present.
That's right.
So what better way than to actually do it in a way to preserve yourself so that you can then, you know, perform for the purpose, perspective, and people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sometimes I'm doing some weird breath work real quietly in a meeting, you know?
Let's see how it looks. What do you do? Okay.
Tell me more about that. I'm like, inside I'm trying to like, you know, not, but I'm trying to breathe in a chill way, you know, and just moving forward. But I don't know, that's why it takes practice though. It's like building up this habit of being able to do that. So still working on it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And finally, in our last 2 minutes, 2-minute countdown here, wisdom to carry forward. All right. So as AI automates more routine decision making, research shows that the most valuable leadership skills are becoming deeply human ones, like building trust, making ethical decisions, and creating meaning for your teams. So as we close, what's wisdom would you most want today's emerging leaders to carry with them?
This is not what I plan to say, but I'll just say, like, one thing that I think that people trip over is not starting with the headlines first. And I say that in a vein of, like, if you're in a presentation or if you're just, you know, delivering a message to a team, sometimes we go around and say all the things of the sub-bullets instead of just saying, what's the headline first, and then you can dig deeper. You lose people. So, like, if you're in an executive meeting and you don't get to the detail, and I'm not saying in a presentation, I'm just saying if you're speaking to someone, a lot of us do the mistake of not hitting the headline and then going deeper. We start with, okay, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the benefits, here's the risks, but you're like, the whole time you're lost them because you're like, what are we talking about?
Right.
You know, they don't have the bandwidth to be able to understand. They're not there. They haven't thought through it with you for a week and a half. When you hit them in that 10 minutes, hit them with the headline first. And a lot of times we just really underestimate the power of that.
Yeah. It's so true, because attention is it's like our most valuable resource, you know, and it's so hard to grab and keep and everything. So I guess mine's kind of in that same category too, of knowing that attention and purpose and influence are so important. I think learning to be better listeners. We all fancy ourselves like pretty good listeners, and we're all like pretty bad at it, you know? And so it's something that's kind of humbling, but that we can all continue to always work on. And then also I would say, listen to yourself too. Stay connected to yourself. Stay in that integrity of learning how to trust yourself more and more all the time.
All right. So in essence, it's starting with the end in mind, right? Yeah. And not losing yourself and actually listening to yourself. Yeah.
And one more thing, I know we're out of time, but I'll just say, for me, I know that everyone here is probably looking at each other and saying, well, I wonder what they do and how they are and how do I compare, and it's just a natural human thing. I would just say stop overestimating what other people do and stop underestimating yourself.
Beautiful.
Because all that comparison kills, right? So be in competition with your own self. Like, I think that's the thing that when you come to these kind of conferences, it can be challenging. And your mind wanders, and it's just not good for your, you know, your wellness. You might have to breathe like Taylor does. So just think about that. Like, we're not comparing. We're going to help each other, like talk to each other, network, work with each other. But everyone's in different seasons of their careers, and just know that you belong where you are and where you're going to be going in the future, and just don't, you know, overestimate or underestimate.
Absolutely. All right, well, that is our time. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's thank our two wonderful panelists. All right, thank you.